Good afternoon, everyone. It's Jim Norris from Backstage Insider, and we have from afar with us Don Ross, a legendary guitarist. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm well. It's a beautiful day here in Dresden, Germany. It's about 24 degrees and sunny. So that part's great. I just came off a very busy guitar workshop weekend. So my co-host Julie and I have just been nursing our wounds today. Just we're so exhausted. Everything's great.
So I noticed that you were from Montreal originally, going back a few years, and I just wanted to know if your parents were musical. Were they an influence in your career decisions?
Yeah, I guess I'm really lucky in that, unlike a lot of musicians, my parents were very encouraging of me having a career as a musician. I know that's, like I say, backwards from a lot of people's uh, experience, but I think they saw from quite an early age that I was intensely interested in music, and I took to instruments very quickly, and I always sang a lot, and was able to harmonize very young and all that kind of stuff. So I think that they realized that I would probably be wasting my time if I did anything else with my life. And I think they were right. My father was uh, like a sort of an amateur musician. He played the bagpipes and he sang operatically. He studied with the McGill Opera Studio in Montreal after he emigrated from Scotland. So he was quite an accomplished singer, but he never decided to go pro with it. I think he started having kids too young and got too worried about making sure the kids get fed and all that kind of stuff. So I think vicariously he had a lot of fun watching me grow into it, the musician that I guess he always dreamed he would be.
That's excellent. I used to teach at Metalworks Institute, and one of my first questions there was, how many people in the room have somebody in their life that thinks you're out of your mind by being in the music business? And virtually 100% answered that way. So, as you say, you are very fortunate that you had that encouragement.
For
Because
sure. Yeah.
a lot of people, the question you get is, yeah, but what do you do during the day? What's
Yeah.
your real
It is hilarious. Every once in a while I still get that question. Like I've been touring for 40 years almost. It'll be 40 years in 2029. And it's like,
wow.
I occasionally get the question, yeah, but what do you do for a day job? And
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
have to
What if you
say,
get
look,
Dairy Queen or something?
yeah, I tell them, look, I don't think I would be doing this for 40 years of my life, thinking that I needed to back it up with something else. This is all I do.
That's great. So what age did you actually start playing the guitar?
I was about 8 years old and I picked up the guitar for the first time. I played piano before that, but I never took lessons as a kid. My older sister did. My sister's 10 years older. So I would look over her shoulder at her music books and she would teach me some of the tunes that she was learning. But mostly I was just, farting around on the piano when I was a kid. And then um, she also went to a boarding school where the nuns got they got a big bunch of money from somebody's will to buy new instruments for the school orchestra. And my sister was playing clarinet and guitar in the school orchestra. And so when the nuns got all this money, they let the kids take their instruments home, their old ones, so to keep. So she had this kind of like plastic clarinet or something, and then a really ancient Stella guitar. Even when she brought it home in the late '60s, it was really old then. Um, but my older brother and I saw that, and we were like both our eyes lit up. Um, we both started learning, and then my older brother basically started teaching me when I was very young. He was 6 years older, so he would learn stuff from friends at school, and then I became his guinea pig on the guitar. So it was great. He was a really good teacher, and he moved on to bass guitar, and then I stayed on the acoustic six string.
Excellent. And did playing the piano, do you think, helped you as far as being a guitarist?
It definitely did when I was a teenager. We got another piano. Like we didn't own a piano for, I guess, when we left Montreal for a year and lived in Winnipeg for one year. My dad and mom sold the piano we had, and then when we moved back to Montreal, um, within about a year of that, so when I was about 13 or maybe a little, yeah, probably 13, they bought another upright piano. And the smart move they made was that I had claimed the basement room as my bedroom, and they put it right in the basement, so I could literally roll out of bed and play the piano whenever I wanted to. And I at that point became very passionate about the piano. And so I was listening to a lot of Joni Mitchell back then and learning a lot of her piano style, sort of learning how the chord structures worked on her tunes. And then I eventually got myself a theory book, and learning theory on a keyboard is infinitely easier than learning it on a guitar.
Right.
Whatever I knew about theory and harmony on the guitar, which at that point was pretty remedial, I was able, it just completely exploded in front of my eyes when I had a piano. I went, oh, that's how this works. Oh my goodness. Now I see it all. So yeah, I mean, just my integral understanding of music really grew in leaps and bounds when I had a piano again. And then I was able to transfer all that information over to the guitar. So at this point, I mean, I've been playing for so long. I feel equally at home on both instruments, and I feel equally like I know both instruments pretty well. I think I'm, because I've been playing guitar more throughout my life and as a career, I'm certainly a better guitar player, but I'm a pretty good piano player for a guitar player.
Right. Excellent. So your first guitar was actually a Stella guitar?
It was, and the action was, about 70 miles off the fretboard, but
I
it gave me
imagine.
the left hand of God, I say, because it's like I had to learn how to press really hard on those strings. So as a result, every guitar I've had made for me since, I have to fight back with it. It has to really not want me to play it because it has to play like that first Stella guitar. And almost anybody else who picks up my guitar is just think, "Oh my god, the action on this is impossible."
That's great. So what type of guitar do you use now? What's your first choice?
I'm really fortunate. I've been working for the last almost 30 years of my career with a fellow named Mark Beneteau,
Right.
and he's based in St. Thomas, Ontario, just south of London, Ontario. And he's an amazing builder. I knew about him a long time before I met him. I tried some of his guitars in music stores, mostly in like Ottawa, where he used to live and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, these are really underpriced for what you're getting. And then when he approached me about the idea of working together, I said, yeah, like, why not? And then he made me the most amazing instrument. And I said, Mark, you need to raise your price. So fortunately, he got himself into he's really good in that he hasn't gone the full tilt boogie route with his pricing, where only dentists and doctors who play for a hobby can afford his instruments. He actually prices them so that, a relatively serious, um, actual player can play them, or professional players can actually afford them, which is great because, I'll mention a few names. I mean, they're great builders: Linda Manzer, Michael Greenfield, Grit Laskin, people like that. I mean, I don't know how many full-time musicians can actually afford those guitars. They're just so expensive.
Right.
So,
And I know with
and also, sorry,
Linda Manter, the demand, even though they're not inexpensive, the demand for her guitars is more than she can ever make.
for
It's
sure. Yeah, her guitars are very desirable, um, and like unfortunately, like I say, not that many of them are sold to full-time players. But that's the irony. It's the irony in the guitar world, and it's less so in like the classical music world. You get a lot of um, like for example, professional cellists or professional violinists, and they'll often pay $100,000 for the guitar for their for their bowed stringed instrument. They'll take out a mortgage and the whole thing, but that's their life. That's all they do is just play that instrument all the time. And even if it costs the moon, they'll pay for it. So I mean, guitarists by comparison have it very easy financially compared to the bowed string instrument world. That's for sure.
for sure. So how old were you when you actually went out and played in front of an audience that wasn't your family?
Yeah, probably. It would have been when I started playing along with church choirs. My father volunteered me basically to when we moved back to Montreal when I was about 13, um, 12 or 13. There was a children's choir at our local Catholic church. So um, my I think my father was a convert to Catholicism because of my mom. My mom was very much a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic, but my father was a Presbyterian Scottish dude who decided to become Catholic so he could marry my mother, which was kind of the rule back then. You couldn't really not be Catholic and marry a Catholic at the time, and so both he and I think, were very reluctant about actually attending church services unless we could play music. So um, he got me involved, and it's true. I would go every Sunday simply so I could play the guitar, and I really enjoyed it. I eventually played in two choirs at the same church, so that's kind of how I got going playing in front of people. But I started playing actual professional gigs in Montreal for money when I was 15. So I remember playing at Friar's Pub on Crescent Street in Montreal when I was 15. The same year, I played at the Yellow Door Coffee House, which was another acoustic haunt, and John Abbott College out in the West Island of Montreal. So I was definitely already gigging. Not, certainly not a full time job, but I was, and I looked older, so everybody just assumed I was this, cool young guitar dude on the scene. But I was all of 15 years old.
Assume in the Catholic Church in those days, the type of music you would be playing was, um, I always call it music by dead guys, so it would tend to be pretty conservative music, I would think.
Actually, it was the post Vatican II era, sort of during the folk scare, you know. So my father was in the adult choir where they sang music by dead guys, and then I was in the teen choir and the children's choir. So a lot of that music was new, and a lot of it was
Okay.
being there was this group called the St. Louis Jesuits. They were these Jesuit priests from St. Louis, Missouri, who they were all musicians as well, and they all wrote these kind of very simple songs that got used to death back then, and a lot of them ended up in the Catholic Book of Worship that everybody had in the pews and all that kind of stuff. So that was mostly what I was playing, and then later on, I really got when I got more interested in music from various era. I mean, I grew up in a very classical music heavy household with my father, but my older brother and I were into soul and R&B and funk and stuff like that. So we were sort of there was a lot of fighting going on over the phonograph back then. But um, I grew up listening to a lot of Bach and Beethoven and Mozart as well. So I had great respect for music from all kinds of eras. And then when I started studying music at York University as a university student, I really got into doing reductions of Baroque tunes and stuff like that for solo guitar, just as an exercise. Not that I would ever play those tunes publicly, but it was very gratifying to sort of come up with my own arrangement of something that had been written 300 or 400 years before, and that was just a great piece of music.
Yeah. So you did you ever take guitar lessons at all, or was it all completely self-learned?
To be brutally honest, let's see, when I was 12, I did 8 lessons with this guy when I was living in Winnipeg, and he took me through the Alfred guitar books, and I was bored to tears. I didn't really want to play Jingle Bells, single note, all that kind of stuff. I was already playing kind of pretty wacky guitar tunes by the time I was 12. And so my dad thought it would be a good idea. And then I told him, no, he's not the right teacher. And then when I was 14, I took one summer of lessons with kind of an amazing jazz fingerstyle guy. He is still active as far as I know. His name is Stephen Cole. He's based in Toronto now, but back then he was based in Montreal, but he was originally from New York City, and just a great musician. He was kind of like I got more out of him in 6 lessons or whatever it was than I had gotten in any other way. He taught me amazing repertoire, and he taught me a lot about music and about different artists. So it was just one summer, but I just had a blast. And other than that, I'm basically self taught on the instrument. But I have a couple of music degrees, but they're not in guitar playing.
I see. Okay. So you learned to read music mostly on your own, partly with some lessons?
Yeah, the lessons helped with that, and then guitarists are notorious for not using written music as much as other musicians,
Right.
especially North American guitarists. We don't really come from this whole didactic school that they have here in Europe, where people very often start with classical guitar lessons and they learn how to read properly on the instrument and stuff like that. So my friend Julie that I tour with here, she's got tons of chops for reading on the guitar, which most guitarists in North America don't have. And myself included, I can read a piece of music, but give me a minute, I need to sit with it and figure out the fingerings and stuff like that. Whereas very often, she can look at something even in an altered tuning and play it off the page, which I always think is kind of like, what kind of sorcery is this kind of thing. But she's got all the chops from having a serious music background as a classically trained guitar player. But then she's much more interested in playing what gets called crossover here, which is sort of using your classical chops to play modern music. And also, she plays steel string and does the singer songwriter thing as well. So she sort of blends various kinds of traditions. I come from a very North American style of guitar playing, and in my case, very much rooted in, which is a bit weird. My roots are very much in black urban music, so I'm mostly into soul music and funk and all that kind of stuff, and it comes through in my music. But I also have huge respect for every kind of tradition. So some of my tunes sound like they could have been influenced by Celtic music or by Western art music like classical music. So comes from
Well,
everywhere. I like everything.
yeah. Yeah, some of the studio guitar not guitarists necessarily, but studio musicians that are out there, their sight reading is scary 'cause when way, way back in the old days when I was a musician, we worked with some studio musicians, and they would come in and put out the music in one take, and they're gone, and that would be it. It would be perfect, and
Hmm.
they have scary, sight reading, abilities, but I guess that's what.
I used to get calls like that quite often when I lived in Toronto. The scariest one was having to sight read for dobro, and play slide guitar. And
Right.
I had never read dobro music before, and I always played in what's called the standard dobro tuning, which is open G tuning. And so I had to play in these weird keys in this weird tuning that was really kind of made for dobro playing. And then, but I managed to do it. I figured out a way to do it. But um, I actually get a kick out of stuff like that. I like the energy of being a little bit nervous and feeling a
For
little bit
sure.
like any things could go wrong. That's actually kind of fun.
Oh, it's true. So so when was it you made your first, recording, went into a studio and actually did a record?
Well, I did a bunch of early recordings as a teenager and early 20s kind of era with various bands I was in back then. And ironically, one of those recordings that I did when I was about 20 years old or something, I ended up unmixing it with AI and remixing it and redoing the vocal and putting it on my new album. So it's kind of crazy because the roots of the recording, like most of the recording is from 1981
Wow.
and the rest of it is from 2025 and then released in 2026. So that's a cool thing about what you can do now with some of these tools. So those are the early recordings I did. And then when I finally did a real record, it was kind of like an album length demo I did in 1986 when I was about 25 years old. I was back in Toronto. I'd finished up all my university and stuff, and I thought, well, I got to get work, So I went into a studio. I saved up a bunch of money, went into a studio, and just recorded everything I could think of, like a bunch of solo guitar tunes, tunes of full band where I played all the instruments, stuff with vocals. My eventual first wife, who passed away many years ago, Kelly, she came in and sang on some of the tunes, some backup vocals. Um, but I played every instrument under the sun on that. I even played a banjo tune. I don't know what I was thinking, but anyway, I I I sent it around to a bunch of studios and managed to get some work. Talked to a couple of good producers back then, but it didn't really lead to anything permanent, or like career wise. And then when I was in this really great band called iMusic, we played the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1988, and that same year I won the US fingerpicking guitar championship, and that got me a lot of press back in Toronto where I was living at the time, and that got me on the news, and then that got me it got an interest, got some interest from a local record label, and that's when my career really started. So I went into a studio in 1988, Manta Sound, which used to be down on Adelaide Street East,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Where Tears Are Not Enough was recorded and all that. And I recorded my first 2 albums there for Duke Street Records back in the late '80s, early '90s.
Excellent. That's great. So,
Mhm.
um, over the years, obviously, and continuing 40 years, you've been a busy guy. I mean, you've done a lot of different things. You've traveled a lot. How did you manage through all of that to balance your career with your personal and family life?
It wasn't easy, I'll put it that way. In fact, very often when younger musicians talk to me and say, "Well, what do you think? Like, I really wanna go for this, music as a life kind of thing. Does it work with a family?" And I very often counsel them that if I knew back then what I know now, I would probably say, "No, it's kind of one or the other." I mean, that said, I did it. I did have a family and everything, but, it wasn't, without going into too much detail, not all of my children were easy to raise, and in that situation, when I'm on the road a lot and my late wife was trying to do, control things at home, that was not easy. So you kinda need, I think if you're gonna be a full-time musician and have a family, you kinda you have to luck into kind of an ideal situation where you have a very understanding partner, completely understands what you're doing and knows how important it is for you to do. You have kids that can figure it out, that this is just, mom or dad's job, and they have to be away sometimes, and then they'll come back and everything will be fine again. You know, I always said to people, when I'm on the I had a 2-week rule with my late wife. I would never go away for more than 2 weeks. And then for those 2 weeks, yeah, she was 100% parenting. And then but when I was home, my kids got me 24/7, And then my wife eventually got ill, and I had to both nurse a very sick wife and also raise 3 kids and keep money coming in. So it was a huge juggling act. So
Yeah.
the way it worked out for me, I think it would have been a lot easier if I had just never gone the family route. But that said, I have 2 grown daughters that I love very much, and a late stepson. Unfortunately, he didn't make it, but um, the the daughters survived. And my younger one has kids now, and my older one is writing books full time. So she carried on the artistic nonsense, which is great.
Yeah, I asked, Jason McCoy from the Roadhammers that question, and he just said, "Well, all I can tell you, it was a train wreck." Was his
Yeah.
comment that wasn't something he did very well. So in your future, you're not really slowing down in any way. Um, touring, you're in Germany right now, and then, I see you have some dates when you come back to Canada in the future.
Yeah, indeed. I'm doing a little mini trip to Ontario. I'm doing uh, a solo show in Aurora, Ontario, just north of Toronto, on May 23rd, and then I'm doing a guitar workshop in Toronto on May 31st, and then also I'm playing the Luminato Festival for the first time in Toronto on June 6th. So June 6th, is that right? Yeah, June 6th. So that'll be a blast. I'm doing a solo set, and I'm also playing with Sultans of String. They have an album they released a couple of years ago called Walking Through the Fire, which is a reconciliation project with indigenous artists. And being of Mi'kmaq descent myself on my mother's side, my mother was Mi'kmaq. They asked me to be part of it. So I did some touring with them a couple of years ago on that project. And then we played a festival last year, and we're playing another festival this year. So it's a lot of fun to do that project. And
Excellent.
then, yeah, then the Canadian touring gets really busy well, there's a mini tour in July. Julie, Malia, and I are playing the Perth Festival, Stewart Park Festival in Perth, Ontario. Looks like we're going to do a date in Ottawa, and another date in Alexandria, and another date in Peterborough on that trip. And then the fall touring is crazy. It's the East Coast and the West Coast.
Excellent. Yeah, I've
Mhm.
known Chris McCool for very many years, and he's a very good guy and very together as a musician and a business person as well.
He's a force of nature. I don't know how he wears all the hats that he wears and gets it all done, but he does an amazingly good job at it too. And yeah, and he's a really approachable, lovely man. So
Yeah, and
it's
it's
all good.
his style of music certainly isn't what you'd call mainstream, and yet he's
Nope,
managed to do very well and attract a huge fan base,
for sure, for
which
sure.
is
Yeah, and he's even
incredible.
doing very successful children's music these days too. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
for
crazy.
sure. So you have a new record that's just come out or coming out?
Yeah, it just came out a couple of weeks back. It's called Songs That Found Me. And a lot of people, including my buddy Julie, were encouraging me to do another vocal record. I hadn't done an all vocal album in about 15 years, and I sneak vocal tunes onto my albums. But I mean, people know me more for the guitar playing. But then when they come to a show, they very often say, "Hey, I really like your voice. I didn't realize you sang, at all, or as well as you do, or whatever they say."
Right.
So I thought it was time to reacquaint people with my voice. So, and I'm not really a lyric writer, so I ended up writing a lot. I mean, recording a lot of covers on this album, with the exception of two songs, which I did co-write. And then, other than that, I did like a Bruce Cockburn tune. I focused on Canadians, Bruce Cockburn tune, Joni Mitchell, City in Color, Armanium from Quebec, Stephen Fearing, um, and then I did one American tune called Running Away by Joey Dosick. Um, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I've got my own studio and a lot of instruments. So I basically played all the instruments except for the drums, which my friend Mapto Much, who lives in Toronto, played drums on the album, and my friend Julie sang on one tune with me. And I think other than that, it's and the old recording with my friends from 1980. They're all on there as well. So they were the other co-conspirators, but divorced by 45 years of time going by. But they all got a big kick out of hearing it again and hearing the new version.
And you live in the Maritimes now.
I live in Windsor, Nova Scotia these days. Yeah, it's about
Excellent.
40
It's
minutes.
interesting with the interviews I've scheduled lately without any intention at all, but 5 of them have ended up being from the Maritimes. Just
Yeah, I
it just
noticed
shows
Natalie there and a few
music
people.
there
Yeah.
actually is out there. It's way out of proportion to the population. It's
Yeah,
such a
that's what I
music
always tell people. There's something in the water, obviously.
I think
You know,
so because when you go to
I
these CMAs and you see the diversity of styles of music, but the population just loves music as well. You see, 12-year-olds and 90-year-olds attending the concerts at the ECMAs.
Yeah, there's a lot of support, like Julie and I do tours in the Maritimes where, like you say, you'll get 10-year-olds showing up and then people with white hair as well. And um, I think what we do too, or what I do solo, it's kind of a little bit timeless. Like people, I've always got a young crew of supporters in Canada because the music grooves a bit, but also I've got people who have followed my career for the last 30, 40 years. And so, they're all gray haired and bringing their kids and their grandkids to the shows. And that's very gratifying.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? So
Hmm.
if you could, give one piece of advice to an up-and-coming guitarist, if somebody out there, is attempting to follow your path, what would your piece of advice be?
I tend to encourage, especially guitar players, not just to listen to guitar music all the time, but to have a really well rounded approach to the music that they listen to. Um, Take in musical information from as many places as you can. As far as the technique of the technique will come if you play a lot of music and if you just play all the time. The the idea that you have to play just like somebody else, I find very unattractive. I would rather hear an individual when I hear a musician. And so I also encourage people to create a lot of content for if they want to, have a career in music, create as much like online content as you can, reels and videos for YouTube and stuff like that. But my encouragement is always keep it musical. Don't just go after clicks. That's certainly not what I do. You can do things like the equivalent of a dog and pony show on YouTube or whatever, and that might get clicks, but very often it's musically empty. it's much more interesting when the music has a lot of meat on the bones, you know? So that's what I really tell people to go for. Become a well-rounded, full musician rather than just somebody who's, doing stunts on the instrument. That I find that
Right.
unappealing. Mhm.
Excellent advice. Well, thank you very much, Don, and I hope everything goes well in Germany and,
Thanks,
uh,
Jim.
and with all your future endeavors. It's been great
Yeah.
talking to you.
Good talking to you. Thanks very much.
Take care.
All the best.